Well, good evening. I'd like to call to order the Town and Village of Victor joint meeting. A couple things. I ask all have not signed in, please do so. Please turn off all cell phones and other electronic devices. Please conduct any private conversation in the hallway or outside. Emergency exits can be found to your right and to your left. This meeting is also live streamed via YouTube with text commenting available. And if you'd all now please rise and join us in a salute to the flag.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, good evening, and again, thank you for taking time in your schedules to come here and join us this evening. And before we start with our presentation, I'm going to turn the floor over to our village mayor, and he's going to introduce members of the Village Board of Trustees.
Thank you, Jack. Good evening, everybody. Gary Haddon, Village Mayor. I'm going to start at the other end of the room with Deputy Mayor Mike Crowley, Trustee Michelle Chalupa, Trustee Bob Kelly, and next to me is Trustee Carol Camiso. Thank
you, Mayor Haddon. I also want to thank, so we're going to introduce, and one is we'll have him start up, Lorenzo Rotoli from LaBella Associates. I do want to also thank all of the members of the steering committee for their efforts, their time they put into all these meetings leading up to this evening. I also want to thank Wes Petty from LaBella Associates and Joe Benzoni, Venzi, from Genesee Transportation Council. So thank all of you, very much appreciated. So, and the DOT, my apologies. Lorenzo, if you would, please.
Good evening, Jack. Good evening, everybody. So I've got the help of Susie in case I'm having technical difficulties, but I'm sure she's got us all covered. So welcome, everybody. Tonight is really just providing an overview of a plan that's been happening over the last year, and this is the culmination of many meetings, many public outreach efforts, and constant massaging of the plan to try to get it to a final study. So just to give you a brief agenda of tonight, I'm just going to very briefly go over the project objective in general, the goals, the town's position statement, basically what we had to start with and what were some limitations on what we could or couldn't do. We did an inventory, then we did a needs assessment based on that inventory and based on feedback from the public. We did a pretty extensive public outreach with meetings, other technology and social media. And then finally, the last piece is the recommendations. And I'll go through those, again, at a high level, just to give you the basic concept and not to get into the weeds. So our objective really was to develop a long-term street network and identify any gaps, be it roadways, sidewalks, trails, and really come up with concept-level plans. And I do want to put this out there, right out there. Everything you're going to see tonight is we were sort of given this open palette of come up with ideas. And some of them may go by the wayside. The town has the option to implement all of them, none of them, whatever they deem they want to progress with. And more importantly, which ones they can get funding for. So again, big picture, some of the drawings look like they're finished design level concept plans. They're just concepts. That's all they are. They aren't detailed design plans at all. So our project area, and I'll try to use this and not blow anything up, is really the 96 corridor. It's outlined with the green. The green are not roads. It's just outlining the area. Includes 251 and sort of the offshoot roads off of 96. Oh, I think I missed one there. Oh, so our goals here, I apologize, I hit advance too fast. So our goals were really to enhance the transportation network and provide access for all users. And what I mean by that is not just people in cars, but bicyclists, pedestrians, anybody else who can use the trails or sidewalks. We wanted to prioritize key links. So where were some of those gaps where if I'm a pedestrian, I'm trying to get from point A to point B And we were looking at those networks of roads and sidewalks to see where we could make those missing connections, if there were missing pieces, and where we could make those connections. And the last bullet really is promoting active transportation, and what that means, it's multimodal. Again, not just cars. We're looking at for people, bicyclists, all users. So just a very quick summary of the town position statement, and these were sort of our marching orders when we started this, and this was in conjunction with the Genesee Transportation Council. We're following their process. It was really to help provide a guide, a map, a roadmap to the future, given the conditions of what's there today, what is likely to happen, and what can we do to position ourselves in the town to make improvements, position the study to help secure funding. So this is what this plan was really about. It looked at broader projects, the broader project study area, and that included the Adams Street extension. And one of the key things was to preserve and repurpose the railroad corridor for multimodal usage. And I'll be upfront with this. When we started, I know the railroad is a very hot topic, right? And we listened to what the rail company, their future plans were. We listened to what the town's thoughts and position was on that. And we tried to integrate it all together. And at the point when we started, the marching orders we received were the rail company, not the town. The rail company said, this line it gets very limited use. And we're looking to abandon the line. So I'll be upfront with that. That's what we were told and how we designed accordingly. So that's why the Adams Street extension is one of the key topics in this whole project study. It certainly doesn't commit the town to any of the ideas we came up with. Like I said, we were tasked to come up with many ideas for many different roads, many different types of users, and to see what can be done, and we'll see what we like, and we'll prioritize that. And that's what happened during the public involvement process, the steering committee, which included both the village, the town, GTC, New York State DOT, the county engineering, highway department, county planning. So there were a lot of knowledgeable voices in there. It wasn't just a consultant coming in here saying, I think I know what you need. It really was a collaborative effort. Most importantly, when we get to the end, this document really helps the town position themselves for funding. As you would imagine, money is scarce no matter what town, village, county you live in, and there's a lot of hands out saying, we've got a really nice project, we want to do something with this, but we need funding. And the ones that rise to the top are the ones who are very well prepared, have done their due diligence, have done the homework, have documented, and this plan is part of that process to really position the town for funding. And the last bullet on the connectivity plan part is, if the town is successful in getting the funding, that starts a new process in the sense of, again, big input from the public on what you want to see as a final product. I mean, like I said, they're concepts we drew. They're a line that can be moved and shifted. It's not dead set, this is the way it has to be. It's just a concept. I can't stress that enough. The Finger Lakes Railroad, I alluded to it already. When we started this, that was a key component to this. What are their future plans so we can be proactive and develop concepts that fit with what they're going to do? I'm not saying whether you like the railroad or don't like their plans, but we're just taking reality and saying this is what their future holds for them, and this is what we're developing concept plans for. So after we did the inventory, which was a lot of data gathering, looked at old previous reports, studies, we actually went out, did some new traffic counts, just get all the best, most current available data that was out there. We went through and then did a needs assessment. And really, what's this needs assessment about? It's looking at what's limiting mobility, movement around the town and village. How do we safely get from point A to point B? And the third leg of that is the connectivity to get from, you got two parallel roads, but you can't get from one to the other. So we were looking at those linkages. What came through loud and clear, traffic operations. This is no secret. Route 96 is a very congested corridor. It carries a lot of traffic. It's a regional route. It's a lifeblood to the region. So a lot of people want to be on that road, and there is a lot of congestion and delays, especially during peak times. We did hear from many people when school lets out. A lot of people like driving their kids. That contributes to the issue of a lot of congestion. If we'd have, 30, 40 kids on a bus instead of 30, 40 kids in a car individually, it would help the situation immensely. The pedestrian facilities, generally the town and the village have great facilities, good condition, good connections, but there are some subdivisions, some outlying portions where the connectivity is lost. There's not a continuous sidewalk path or trail path to get from the village, downtown village, to maybe some of the outskirts. So that's where we identified some potential connections. The bicycle facilities, while there are no dedicated bike lanes and that sort of facility for the bikes, there are a lot of trails that they can use. And certainly there's some opportunities for in-road facilities, dedicating some bike space, safety treatments. At the bottom there are bike boxes to make left turns, so they're in front of the queue of vehicles so everybody sees them. Or just marked conflict areas where somebody in a car knows to look for a bike, that's their shared space and they're allowed to be there too. So some of the opportunities that came out of that assessment, the three big focus areas were traffic operations. So, the easy thing is signal coordination. Now, the good thing is the states they're on top of their system. The equipment is, about 10 years old, so it's still fairly new. They do signal coordination. I checked in October of 2021 was the last time they coordinated their signals, and using timing and synchronization to make it, optimize it and get as much capacity out of the system as possible. But some of the other things we could look at, the access management side, and that's, a parallel road, some connections to maybe alleviate some of the traffic off of Route 96. The pedestrian facilities, a lot of suggestions were given, first through the steering committee, but then through the public input process, and there's about a dozen locations where there's call-outs to say this would be a good spot for more sidewalks. And then upgrading the connections to the trail system between the regular sidewalks and the trails. And as I mentioned, the bicycle facilities, looking at whether new road projects or maybe retrofits to expand and improve the in-road facilities, signage, striping, markings, things like that to help dedicate that space. So I want to touch on the public outreach a little first. I know during the course of the project, I'd get calls once in a while. My name was on the website, so I'd get people just interested and say, I didn't know about the meeting or that. So we tried many methods to reach out to people. I just want to go through them real quick just to identify some. So last Christmas, during the Jingle Mingle, we were set up in here. We had about 75 people came in, talked to us, filled out surveys, which was great. Then online material was available for them to further comment for people who maybe weren't right physically at the Jingle Mingle. We provided surveys, like I said, online. There was a public comment period after a second meeting. We used some technology, instant input. The second from the bottom was an app that there was a QR code on the website where you could go in and also fill out surveys. And then the town website, everything we did, we posted on there. So meeting minutes, draft reports, technical memos. We're trying to be as transparent. We're not trying to hide anything. It was all up there. Jumped ahead one there. So two of the key questions in that survey that we asked people to comment on was, is this concept plan we're developing, is it meeting the goals that we stated at the beginning of the project? Mobility, safety, connectivity. And what we found was a lot of people said the Adams Street extension meets a lot of those goals. That one is hitting a lot of the buttons. In addition to Adams Street, there was also the call out for Route 96, Main Street and High Street. That intersection's a tough intersection with the angle and such, so people identified that. And the last one at the bottom was the Anthony Drive extension, and I have graphics I'll show a little later on, but basically coming off 96 and Anthony potentially connecting to Brace Road. And the other nice thing about that, it can substitute for where Brace Road currently comes on to 96, which is near that bridge, have sightline issues, the curve, speed. So you'll see some graphics that'll show some recommendations for that. The second key question we asked, we have a list of items that like I said, we tried to come up with as many things as we could. And we said, okay, out of those, what are your top priorities? And we told people, give us your top 2. And then we aggregated everything. And again, the same thing was coming up. At Adams Street Extension, got a lot of response, followed closely by signal coordination. And those were the 2 biggies to say that would improve and meet some of the goals of what you're trying to achieve. So now I'm going to summarize the recommendations for you. I'll talk about each bullet individually, but this is the list. So these were after the public comments and all the input we received. We started out with one, from number 1 to number whatever. And then after the comments, we reshuffled because based on feedback from the public saying what was really important. If that way, if we can just do 1, what's our top thing? If we could do 2, what's our second most important thing? And as you get to the bottom of the list, they may get a little less prioritized, but they're still there for historical content. So if by chance we get really lucky and we get a lot of funding, maybe you could do more than 1, maybe more than 2. So that's how they were reordered. So let me go through each one individually. So the extension of Adams Street looked at 3 sections. And the first one was the yellow outline, and that's from School Street to the Village Line. It's right in the middle, high priority. You have Adams Street to the east already. And that one was about $5 million to build a road. And I want to say this about the road. It's not a bypass. If you hear anybody say bypass, it wasn't in our report. We don't use that word. It's a complete street, small, local, tight, smaller lanes, bike lanes. It's really not meant to be a cut-through street. It's meant to be a community street, and hopefully it sort of borders 96 to the north, and this new street to the south creates a nice space for the community. Sort of think about as Mead Park, but extended and longer and bigger. That's what we're trying to achieve. The second phase was further to the west, and that's from the Village Line to Route 251. And again, keeping that same street mentality of a local, small, tighter street. That is another almost $6 million to complete that. I mean, these are long runs, so the price adds up really quickly. And then the third phase would go to the east side of Maple, and that's along the rail corridor. And there, at first we had presented continuing Adams Street, but again, based on feedback, people were more appreciative of saying, that side, maybe that's just a trail, not a roadway. And that's what we're showing there is a trail instead of a road. And again, it connects into the various trail network that you have in the village and the town already. A little cheaper because you're not building a ton of asphalt. It's more just a small path. So $1 million for that. It totals just under $12 million if you were to do everything. And let me show you, this is sort of a section of a proposed road. To the right of the screen is Route 96 to the north. We purposely shoved the roadway closer to 96, and the reason for that is on the left side of the screen is the wetland area. We want to try to stay away from that for a myriad of reasons. And what you're seeing in the section, as I mentioned, 11-foot lanes, a little tighter, 6-foot bike lanes on each side, 5-foot sidewalk, and this would be some commercial that's existing there now, some potential new driveway connections, and new short streets to connect into 96. And on this side, again, based on community input, they said, well, you have sidewalk over here, but this area is, nice, it's not built up. You have nature. And so we put in a 10-foot multi-use path, so that way, if you're walking or bike riding, you could be on either side, depending what you want to do. If you're popping into stores and such, you have this side, and if you're just riding through to connect to the Auburn Trail or some other trail connection, you have a 10-foot path. There was a concurrent study that was being done at the same time as ours. They were independent of each other, but what the Adams Street feasibility study did that we didn't do, they really got into the weeds of looking at what type of environmental issues are there, what type of right-of-way issues, just things that were beyond conceptual level for us. And what they did is a full topographic survey and mapping this, so they fine-tune the property lines, things like that. They did environmental screenings to see where the wetland footprint is. Is there any other issues, rail ties, things like that. And they developed a plan, had a slightly different section than ours. They were trying to reduce cost or minimize cost, so that didn't have the bike lane. So if you're looking at both plans together, you say, why is this one a little more? And the concept plan we did, it was because of the 6-foot bike lanes on each side. It adds pavement, it adds cost. That's why the price tag's a little different if you're comparing. It's not a direct apples to apples. And what we have here, this is the mini roundabout connection at the in the village. This is one of those connections between the new road and 96. That way there's other access points. And this is at 251. Again, that treatment is subject to change. This is just a conceptual look, 2 lanes for lefts and rights to get out to 251. The second item that got a lot of traction was Anthony Drive extension to Brace Road. And again, this is easier to show than explain. So first, let's see, where's my, am I not? Oh, my arrows aren't coming up. I'll use my pointer instead. Okay. Maybe it's just catching up with me. Sorry about that, folks. So, first was, we have a stub road here now, Anthony, and we looked at connecting it all the way to Brace. One of the reasons for that, there was always talks about maybe some future town facilities coming in this area. I believe there's one more lot or spot for a building as part of this development. It made sense to pull everything together, and then you're coming out here, and it could trigger a need for a signal given the traffic on the one side of 96, and if you have all this new traffic coming here. And that does work well with a previous study, the Victor Access Management Plan, where it said, what's the proper spacing? You don't want signals like every 1,000 feet because that creates a headache for the driver, right? And this was actually sort of perfectly spaced between signals. It's probably more than at least at half a mile between them. The second item, you mentioned that, the potential signal. Third was we did want sidewalk. You can see the yellow line there. I'm sorry about the shaky hand there. And eventually coming across Brace and then tying into the municipal park and eventually into the Auburn Trail. So we wanted to keep this all connected, especially if some town facilities end up over here. And let's see if I can get the 2 Brace Road options. Let's see if my arrows, oh, there we go. There was the new connection. There was the new signal. There was the new sidewalk. And then at the existing Brace Road, there's 2 potential options. One, we could make this intersection that exists today a right in, right out only. What that does, it eliminates the left-hand turns, which are very dangerous. And again, we were talking about sight distance, the curvature of the bridge, elevation, speed. So that would reduce the high-impact left turn accidents. The other option, if this one doesn't want to catch up. Oh, maybe now. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Would be to dead end it, create a cul-de-sac so anybody who has access along this area of Brace could come back out and get onto 96 that way. So there's 2 options there. Next, the third item that kept coming up, new sidewalks and trail connections. So this is the reordered priority list, 1 through 12. When we started, they were mixed up a little differently. But again, after public input, these are the ones that, 1 being the highest priority of what people really thought. This is what would have the most impact, most bang for the buck. So these were the recommendations of sidewalks and trails. Priority was based on public feedback, and what you see on the far right-hand side is the cost. Some of them get some big numbers. There are some areas where you may have to have some small retaining walls. There are some challenges because of the elevation and the grades. So it's not just pouring some concrete sidewalk, there's a little more to it. And again, if you did all 12, it's a pretty big number, but you could see they range from 100,000 to 600, so we're all over the place. And again, it depends on length and what kind of challenges we have, geometry challenges. For the pedestrians and bicyclists, in addition to the sidewalks, there's some treatments, and again, for any new projects that are being done, roadwork projects, or any retrofits, these are general recommendations we say should be in the toolbox for the town and the village to increase access and safety for the ped and bike users. And some of the things, high visibility signing and treatments, so bike lane signage, you have the pavement markings to designate their space, hopefully a little buffer between cars and bicyclists. If you can't get the space, there are share lanes. This designates to the driver that it is shared space, maybe a little wider than 11 feet, but it's to accommodate both bicyclists and vehicles. And then for pedestrian crossings, this really is sort of almost a Cadillac where you have striping, signage, and then you have things that really grab your eye if you're the driver. So this is a traditional beacon, flashing beacon to let the driver know there's a pedestrian in there. This is sort of the newer item, rectangular rapid flashing beacons. When a call is made from a pedestrian, you get the strobing lights here, LEDs, really high impact. And then another option is the sign is bordered by LED lights, so it flashes and again captures your attention, so you know it's somebody else's space at this moment. Route 96 and High Street. So this had a lot of potential items that we could look at. The first one, and again, like I said, these are all concepts. It may never come to fruition, but we said, let's try things and see what happens. So this was a roundabout, and I know just like the railroad discussion, the roundabouts elicit a lot of emotions of pro or con. Tonight, let's not yell at each other. It's an idea that was plopped on a piece of paper to see if it could work in the first place. It does require property takings. It certainly decreases delays because there's constant movement, all those slower speeds, but you aren't stopped at a dead stop. There are a lot of safety benefits that now you get rid of the left-hand turn high impact accidents. If you have any, they're usually minor side swipes. Nobody's getting hurt. Little fender bender, but nobody's getting hurt. It does provide traffic calming in a sense by lowering speeds, which we sort of want in the village where there's a lot of pedestrians and obviously school kids taking High Street and coming down into the village. It can act as a gateway feature. There's certainly a lot of things you could do with the roundabout, but it does have property impacts. You see the footprint. It's got to be a little wider. We tried to shove it to the north to try to minimize impact to these properties, but it does impact that property. There's ped accommodations on each leg. We actually, this side, we removed oh no, it's still there, I'm sorry, it's still there. But it does have impacts. Something that big is not gonna not have impacts. The second item we looked at for that intersection is improve existing signals. Like I said earlier, the state had installed new controllers, so they got intelligence to them. They work on calls, on demand. They were recently coordinated in October of 2021. What that means, they go out and do counts, and it's like one leg heavier than the other. Should we be giving more green time? So you develop phasing timings and plans and patterns to accommodate and be the most optimal firing order of phasing. There was the third bullet, adaptive signal control. You have 3 intersections, signalized intersections, very closely spaced, which naturally causes problems because one spills over into the other one. Adaptive signal control is sort of smart technology for the lights. I guess it's detection on steroids. They aren't cheap though. Those are in the order of $50,000 to $60,000 per signal. You have to have a lot of video detection to look at all legs. But what it does, it's more dynamic. So usually the old way, there may be inducted sloops on the ground, or maybe a video camera, and it says, hey, that leg has 10 cars, time to shift and give some green there. And it does it on a sort of a fixed cycle. Adaptive control is a lot more dynamic and can be more responsive. And usually we set, and I don't want to speak for the state, but usually a signal may have 3 signal patterns, an AM rush hour, an evening rush hour. If it's in a commercial corridor, it may be a Saturday, and it accounts for different traffic volumes, where they're coming from, where they're going to. Adaptive is constantly changing all day long. So at 2 o'clock, hopefully you're not sitting there saying, I'm the only car at this intersection. There's no other cars on the other legs. Why is it red? This has a little more intelligence, but again, a lot more expensive. We did talk about bullet 4, removing the western side pedestrian crossing. And the reason for that was right on Reds, if there's people coming down High Street, it could process more traffic. We'd push all the pedestrians to the east side of the intersection and have one crossing of 96 on the eastern side of the intersection. And then we inquired with the state, the last bullet there, were there, I know a lot of the feedback we received was on the school and how that really influences this intersection, and you get this flood of people coming in and out. And we did check to see if there was any special timing patterns that were dedicated just for 2:30 to 3:30 and maybe independent of morning rush hour or evening rush hour. So we asked, and there wasn't, but the reason there wasn't, we actually took counts and we saw they were pretty consistent with the numbers, so it's a high traffic intersection. There, other short of 10 o'clock at night during AM rush hour, evening rush hour, afternoon rush, there's still a lot of traffic trying to be processed at that intersection. The third thing we looked at, item C, and this one I got a lot of calls on, and naturally anybody who lives in the village was like, hey, what's going on? What are you doing there? So I'll try to go through this quickly. This was an idea, we worked with the village, the highway department we'd always heard mention of, we have some ideas, and we doodled on paper. We said, well, let's for historical context, let's document it just so we know what it looks like, because it was always just an idea, but we never had the lines drawn on there. So that's where this came from. We drew it up, and again, the fair is in, it looks like it's a real design plan, and again, it's a concept only, was like, here's some potential connections that could maybe alleviate some of the issues at High Street. And I will try to point again. So first was putting this new driveway to come out this way. And this would be a school bus only roadway to get out of the campus and come out to the light and have a traditional, maybe more of a 4-way. There was the Dryer extension, and the idea is that maybe the traffic could come here. If they're going south of the village, they were probably doing this, and now maybe we could take them directly here and use that. And again, it's trying to sort of balance and not have everybody go to the one intersection. It was trying to give options that way. And then the last thing was a new parallel road between Moore and School. Again, just trying to get traffic off this section. If there's, we looked at it like there's a subdivision back here, and hopefully the kids are just walking. I know there's a pedestrian trail there, but if they're not walking, maybe the parents, if they insist on driving, they can get them to the school without getting on 96, and hopefully there's some ways to get around that. And maybe this is not just the bus only, that was our initial idea, and maybe it does allow for some traffic coming here. I do want to say, a lot of the calls I received about this, there was concerns like, hey, we bought a house here and it was a dead-end road and you're making it a through street. I did explain, remember the priority list here, we're way down and C on items, third item, and we're on letter C of how many items within the third item. So we're starting to move way down the list of priority. The other part of it is to have a successful funding application, you got to do a lot of bang for your buck. While this may alleviate some traffic, it's probably incremental compared to some of the other options, and it may not score very well, and that's what I shared with people who called. I go, if you're lucky, you may get 1, 2, maybe if you're really lucky, 3 projects. We're on project like 7 or 8 here, so it is way down on the priority list. And again, bang for the buck is the key driver here. Let's see. Oh, now my arrows come up. Okay. Okay. The fourth component to try to alleviate things at 96 and High Street is really talking with the school to see if there's some operational changes that they could implement. And the first things that throw out, now we didn't have the formal meetings with the school, but these are things that could be followed upon, staggering hours by grades, so not everybody's exiting at the same time. Staggering parent pickup times, and so their vehicles and the bus departures are different, so we're not all there at the same time. And the last one is really trying to incentivize people to have them use the bus transportation system. Again, there's a graphic we always see in the planning world where it shows, a road section and there's 30 cars on it. And then you could take those 30 cars, if you put everybody in a bus, it would take a heck of a lot more space. So those are the types of things we're saying maybe is further discussions with the school. The last one is really implementing some incremental implementations that came out of other studies also. And most of these came out of the Route 96 Transformative Corridor Study. And again, maybe individually, they don't have a ton of impact on the High Street 96 intersection, but if you're doing these in series, as a couple of them, maybe they will have a nice impact. Oops. Let me get, just a cost summary, we pulled these from the previous studies. The reconstruction of 96 and High Street, that was the roundabout, 2.3 million. Those adaptive signal controllers, again, about 60,000 per controller, or per signal, there were 3 of them. We rounded up a little to 200,000. The new village street connections, this is where I was talking about the bang for the buck. I mean, that's a lot of money to put in some village streets, and how much impact will they really have? They may have some, but is it worth 5.7 million? That's a much more detailed analysis to run. And then implementation of the school district operations, while no capital construction costs and may have some impact on the school district, they're changing their operations. And just to summarize, these were some of the previous studies where we pulled things from. And again, it was like, let's not have 5 studies with different things all over the place. We tried to combine them all so they were all in one place. That way, as it moves forward, it's all in one comprehensive document. So first we had the Victor Access Management Plan, which was completed last year, and that was town-wide, and there were some 3 road connections that were recommended in that study that fell within our Route 96 corridor that I mentioned at the beginning. These were from the strategic Route 96 transformative corridor, and you see the price tag with each one of those. So again, just to capture everything in one place. And finally, it really comes down to this. So the funding source to make all this happen, there's three ways. You can apply for the grant and cross your fingers, very competitive, as I said. But I think you guys are well positioned because you've done your homework. You got a lot of good background. It's been studied more than once. So you have a lot of good detail. Part of it is private development is things come in. You can make the sidewalk connections, trail connections, and make that part of the approval process to make sure let's do it incrementally as we build so we don't have one giant project at the end. Wherever there's an opportunity, let's take advantage of it. And then lastly, if there are DOT capital projects that happen to be within the project area, I'm sure they'll look at this and say, hey, maybe this idea was a good idea, we want to include it. And they say the rest of them, we don't like them and we're not going to do them. But certainly there's a three-pronged approach here on how to get things built. And that is my very abbreviated, I know I see familiar faces who've sat in on previous steering committee meetings. We got much more in the weeds. The idea tonight was to keep you awake for 45 minutes. And that is the presentation. Jack, I don't know if you want to.
Lorenzo, why don't you stay right there? I do, I introduced a number of the members, but I failed to introduce Paul Spitzer with the New York State Department of Transportation, 2 internal members from our town team, Kathy Rayburn, and she's the Director of Economic Development, and Kim Kinsella, who oversees the Planning and Building Department. So Mr. Tom Harvey from the Ontario County. And Tom is the Director of Planning for Ontario County. And Tom, appreciate everything you did. I know Bill Wright's not with us, the Commissioner of Public Works. Bill was involved, as well as John Turner from the, he's the Director of Public Works for the village government. So I know this is, for many of us, our first time seeing all this. So a lot to process, no question about that. I do know one of the committee members was our own village mayor, so I'm going to put him on the spot and ask him if he has any input he'd like to add. I know there's a number of potential projects here for the town that would certainly, I know Anthony drives one that we have been taking a look at in Brace Road for a number of years now, but there's a number of village projects, so love to hear your input, if you would, as well as other members of your board.
So it's no secret what my favorite thing in the plan is, and that's the Adams Street Extension Project. I think you talk about bang for buck and the biggest impact, I think that's it. There's a lot of research that was done, surveys and public input and so forth that I believe supports that. I also know it's probably the costliest option. But there's also a lot of other good information in this plan, and I want to thank Lorenzo and the team for the due diligence that was done on this. I mean, you guys thought of things that I would never have thought of myself, so, and as Lorenzo says, who knows where we end up? We don't know that yet, but we do have a lot of good information to choose from. I don't know if there's anybody on the village board that wants to speak. Feel free. We have had some discussions about the plan, but not on this level of detail, so this is good for us tonight.
And I will share with everybody, everything is on the town website. If you saw graphics and you're like, oh, I wish I would have taken a picture, it's all on there, all the reports, all the meeting minutes, everything is there. There's nothing hidden. It's all there. You didn't have to scribble like crazy to write notes or take pictures.
I think both boards are very committed to public safety, whether it's pedestrian or vehicle as well. That's why for the town board, that Anthony Drive has been something we've been eyeballing, because if any of you have ever been out to the east side of the town and take a left-hand turn off of Brace coming this way, and we have over time, the last few years, I think it was 3 years ago, the town did add some additional land over there that we owned already. And we did talk to our highway superintendent about, would that be a place, because he has outgrown his existing facility, but so we're kind of looking at different areas. But he's clearly said no to that, because it would just be, you have a fully loaded salt truck leaving there. It would be problematic taking a left-hand turn. So that's why we certainly look at that, Anthony, as a potential area that we would go move forward down the road. We have had conversations with the developer that owns a medical complex there, and continue to grow over there as well. I know there's one I was really, first time I had seen that is that dedicated bus road. And the reason I say that is because I know I have heard from our fire departments and our fire marshal that, at the end of school, it's difficult if, God forbid, there's an emergency and we have to get fire apparatus up High Street on certain hours of the day, morning and night as well. So, but again, we weigh value with cost and things.
And I would add, Jack, that graphic had a lot of lines and spines. I should have said it is a la carte in the sense that you don't have to build all of them. You could piecemeal it for what you need. If that emergency access is all you want, you could do that, and that 5.7 million number starts shrinking very quickly. So,
Town board members, and I know we offered the village board members, but I certainly don't want any of you to not offer some comments.
I think that I like the presentation. Thank you very much for that. And I think the thing that I'm captivated by are the different options. And I think, like, for example, the right in, right out on Brace. right? I'm thinking, the village isn't going to want to go down all the way around Anthony Drive to get back to their facility and their sewage treatment plant. And then I wouldn't have thought of the right in, right out. And it makes it so much easier, safer, cheaper certainly than abandoning all that and bringing it down. Little things like that. We'll have discussions down the road. It's going to depend on funding. It's going to depend on, like you say, the grant applications and those things as far as what we can afford. I agree with Mayor Haddon about that access to all of those establishments down 96 on that corridor down through there to be able to get in the backside to some of those places that are already established, to keep it a road that's for us and not as a bypass type of thing, I think is enticing. And then, we all have our opinions on that roundabout at High Street. I'm thinking, okay, we're going to have a roundabout, and then we're going to get stuck on the roundabout because we're getting stopped trying to get to the light at School Street. So, I don't know if that's anything that would work down the road, but I think having a plan, having some options to look at, and then now I think it's a wait and see where the funding comes in, and then get into the weeds, I guess, as we move forward.
Thank you, Dave. Ed, Mike, or Drew?
I guess the only question I have, and I appreciate the information, and certainly it's nice formally for the first time to see this. As far as that Plan C we talk about, that's so far into the future. When we look at that versus the Adams Street extension, which is really the very realistic next step or first phase of this, how does this plan's final approval, is that something with the continued public input this session and future sessions in the near future, where that will drive what will make it in and what will make it out of it?
So I'll ask Wes to help me on the seeker and approvals and stuff, but
And then the only other question I guess I wanted to piggyback onto that was similar to that when we look at grant funding. Certainly I'm not well versed in applying for especially large state and federal grants for something like this. I guess I'd like to understand, it might not be tonight certainly, but what cumulatively is in the project, or is there a best strategic way to get grant funding? So meaning we have the whole presentation tonight in the final plan versus we scale that down to what's really more applicable and realistic, and we apply for grant funding on that alone? Are we better off doing that versus, there's some wish list items on here that, if I were to guess, are probably never going to happen.
right.
So I guess where when we boil it down, what boiled down reduced version is most likely to get us that grant funding? And that's something I guess is just like that 30,000-foot view question that I'd just like to understand a little bit more about.
So there are, I'm just getting close to the mic. So there are different grants. The big one is RAISE. I forget what the acronym stands for, but those are for bigger size projects, usually 25 million and above. And certainly if you add all these up, would get you there. Problem is that those are usually like downtown, big city, urban core, total transformation type projects. So that may be a challenge to say, let's just lump it all together and go after a RAISE grant. The Adams Street on its own is a high priority, and it has certainly a lot of bang for the buck. In addition to just transportation, it just transforms your downtown area. I think those were the ones that may be a different funding mechanism. And I'm a transportation guy, not a funding guy, but there's different vehicles of different. I don't know if you know them off the top of your head, Wes, but. Different funding options available. There are many.
Actually, I'd like to weigh in a couple things. So one of the last screens that went up showed the Head Lane Road at 2.3 million. Mm-hmm. So I think it was about 3 years ago, Tom Harvey and Bill Wright, they took that plan and we had heard from Congressman Jacobs' office that there was potentially some federal funding, but again, having that plan, and that was, again, one of the top 6 in the Route 96 corridors study. So we had that, Tom and Bill put that in, and unfortunately, a lot of those monies went by the wayside. Joe Bavenzi, Genesee Transportation Council, part of his role in government is overseeing federal dollars, Joe, correct me if I'm wrong, federal dollars that come in. Towns like Victor and other communities throughout this 9-county region submit applications. Your team, you have a planning team that reviews them. Some of them are sidewalk projects as well. And then again, we try to line up funding. Sometimes we've been successful with many sidewalk projects in this town. We haven't enjoyed any success to date with road projects. But, so those are a couple to answer your question. Federal dollars are a big thing. And again, I'm not really familiar with the state process. Consolidated funding applications, the CFA. You know, again, they seem to be hitting, you know, the large counties across the state and then the big cities rather than, you know, once in a while you might, they throw us a few morsels of.
Yeah, and one of the other ones may be downtown revitalization initiatives, maybe that may fit in there, being it's right in the heart of the village and the town. There's many options, just they're all very competitive, as I said. Everybody's got a great project they want to do, but, you know, positioning yourself is the most important thing.
Joe, I don't want to put you on the spot, or Paul, either one of you, if you want to add anything. Again, I'm not going to hold that to you. I mean, I'm going to write your name down and the time you said it, but I won't hold you to that. If either of you, there is a mic there, it should be on, hopefully.
Yes, Joe?
Press the button.
Okay, can you hear me? So Joe and I were talking a little bit about this. Really, the state does go through the MPO process also. So it's really, we take all the projects in the area and we really look to try to get whichever ones will give us the most benefit. And that's why sometimes, in the last time we got the roundabout down at Route 96 in Linaw. The one further up Linaw didn't get it, just didn't score quite as well. So there is some competition, but the state does look really, we're part of the whole team. Sometimes Monroe County or Ontario County, they beat the state out on some of the projects. But really, the idea is to try to get the money to where you'll get the most benefit for all the different communities. I don't know if you want to.
No, I think Paul covered the key points. I'll just throw in there just briefly, you know, we do like to look at projects that have a multimodal component to them. So it's automobiles, you know, bicycles, pedestrians, you know, multimodal system. And I think one of our concerns, and Lorenzo didn't really get into this with the presentation, but it's important to note that from our point of view, we want to make sure that railway right-of-way is preserved for future use. That's sort of a key point here, whether the railway stays or goes, you know, however we can make use of that piece of land for the benefit of the community. So we would not want to see that be, you know, chopped up and sold off. So that's something we'll be, you know, working on as well going forward.
Thank you, and just for everyone's knowledge, the railroad continues to negotiate with the county on that portion of the rail, we'll say from Route 251 maybe to the spur that heads to Victor Insulators. And if they are successful with the county, coming up with an agreement on you know, the railroad ties and the rails and things of that nature, then and only then would they proceed with the abandonment process, and that's with the federal government. So I think folks are kind of looking maybe what's the next step, timeline. The town historically has adopted, well, we hope to adopt a sewer master plan in the next few months, but we have adopted in the past when presented with the Parks and Rec master plan, Route 96 corridor plan, we adopt those plans. And I know Lorenzo mentioned it, that having these documents, it's more like, instead of just saying, hey, we have this great concept and here's my vision state or here's my vision federal, would you throw us some money? So having this and then making that full commitment by adopting those plans usually has, in our opinion, carries some more weight. So that's our intention at some point, and I say at some point, to possibly adopt this plan. And I think the next step is authorizing our engineer, Labella, to walk us through a supplemental generic environmental impact statement, which could be, could last as long as 90 days, 60 to 90 days, and worst case scenario, go 120 days. And the adoption of that, GEIS, again, would be, it'd be public hearings for those, opportunities for the public. I know public, there's probably members here that would love to speak this evening. Rather than asking one or two, it's difficult. So I would ask if you have any written comments or you want to send emails, please send them to the town clerk. She will share them with the village government as well. The village board meets Mondays, the first and third Mondays of every month. Victor Town Board meets the second and fourth Monday of every month. You're more than welcome to stay during our regular meeting and offer some comments. The village board members, I would presume, would be leaving here in the next few minutes, but certainly feel free to offer the comments this evening to the Victor Town Board. Anything else before Lorenzo? Mayor Hatton.
Jack, just one more thing. Since this really is a town plan, the village, our role in it is somewhat secondary. However, we do support the plan, and we plan on, if it's adopted, passing a resolution in support of the adoption of the plan, because it definitely affects the village. A lot of the options, not just the one I like.
Jack, just a quick comment. One of the things that this board has said is for 30-some-odd years, we've heard about Route 96 and the traffic. We've all talked about it, we've all heard about it, but finally, we're getting to the point where we're going to do something about it. And that's one of the things that I think I'm most encouraged by, is that we're starting to take some actions that hopefully will lessen some of the effects and take care of some of those things we've been talking about for years and years and years, but never really seen anything that's improved it. So that's why I'm encouraged by seeing the plan start to come together.
And I know, just, you know, when the town board adopts the plan, and whatever the dollar amount is, you know, we've adopted, I'll use an example, the Parks Master Plan in 2019, and I think it, if you added up all the projects excluding, and I say excluding a community center, which had a price tag anywhere from 11 to 20 million, just for park upgrades, and we're going to, you know, we're earmarked to do some next year. We've been engineering done this year. We're going to add additional parking at Dryer Road, Victor Municipal Park. We're going to start a dog park project. We did pickleball in the hamlet of Fishers. Those combined were about $10 million. I don't think since 2019, I don't think we spent $250,000 yet. The Route 96 corridor study, I think that total, that was another one, I think maybe in the $12 to $15 million range, and I think, I don't think we haven't done a project yet. Again, Tom and Bill's proposal for the 2.3 lane road, that was one, and certainly we'll see what happens with this Adam Street. So, anything else, members of either board? Okay. Public, thank you very much for your coming out and your interest in this. We'll take a short brief break.